We're here with Philip Hii, our guest artist at South Texas College. Philip, it's great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
We also are joined by Jaime Garcia, our guitar instructor here at South Texas College. I'm William Buhidar. I'm the Assistant Dean for Fine Arts here at South Texas College. Philip, let's talk a little bit about the program that you have prepared for us tomorrow evening, please.
Well, I'll be starting with two pieces by Santiago de Murcia, and then going to Fernando Sor's Sonata Opus 22. And then I'm going to end the first half with two pieces I just recently arranged for solo guitar. I recently did this tour with a clarinetist of Malaysia. We played a few concerts, and so we played these two pieces, Cafe 1930 and Nightclub 1960, and I just love the pieces so much I decided to play all by myself.
These are pieces by Piazzolla.
Yes, yes.
Fabulous.
And actually these are brand new. I just did them a few weeks ago. So I've been practicing a lot trying to get the fingers under the notes.
And
the second half, I'm going to start with a bunch of pieces by Francisco Tárrega, who I'm very proud to be, part of that lineage from him, because I studied with a student who studied with a student of Miguel Yobey, and who was Francisco Tárrega's foremost student. So anyway, ending with the three flamenco pieces. Now, the first piece has an interesting history. It's just called Etude Number 2 by Juan Serrano. Now, I first heard this piece back when I was still in college, only a few years ago. And I just loved the piece so much. I decided to transcribe it, but unfortunately, the record that I had, which I borrowed from the library, had a skip in it. And you know, in those days we had records, right?
Absolutely.
And so I wasn't able to transcribe the whole thing. So when I met Mr. Serrano in the early 200s, I told him about my project, and he said, well, I've got a recording, I'll send you a CD. So he digitized the record, he sent it to me, and last December I decided to finish transcribing it, wow, which I did. Fabulous piece. It's like a flamenco study, but unlike other flamenco pieces, it's not a single rasgueado. It's all finger picking. So I'll be playing that, and then another piece after that. I'll be playing Jose Feliciano's version of Malagueña.
Oh, interesting.
Again, interesting history. I actually started playing that years ago in Germany. And back in the day, I wasn't really too concerned about doing it right meaning the way he did it. And I just simply got the notes, listened to it, got the notes, and kind of make a little arrangement out of it. But now with YouTube and so many great videos of Jose Feliciano playing it, I say, well, I'm going to do it right this time. So I went ahead and retranscribed the whole thing. Wow. And because I'm able to watch him play it, I'm able to get all those nuances. For instance, there's one part in the middle. I didn't even know he was playing it with the left hand alone. Yeah. So watching him, I said, oh, wow. So that whole thing is played with the left hand. Wow, so right hand is sitting on top of the guitar. And then I'm finishing off with a piece from Paco Peña. Now, I actually met Paco Peña in London when I was there many years ago. And what a great guy. Such an incredible person. I was having some problems in London at the time, and I called him up, and he didn't know me, but we both knew a mutual friend. Mm-hmm. So he invited me to his place, and great advice. And of course, he made wonderful coffee. so I remember sitting in his basement drinking coffee with him. But I'll be playing Herencia Latina his composition. It's a great piece of music again.
You bring up an interesting, some interesting thoughts to me, and that is developing a program. You know, sometimes the audiences might not fully understand that these programs that we put on, they're not just thrown together. It actually takes some study to do so.
Yes.
Can you maybe comment a little bit about your process on how you develop or create or develop a program?
Yes. Well, I always like to start with something of substance, like the Soul Sonata. I feel like we need some meat in the program. But then if you play an entire hour of just heavy, substantial works, you know, you run the risk of boring people, and you know, I've already been you know, in the audience many times, and I just sometimes just would like a little bit a lighter program. And so crafting it together where you have a little dessert, or actually sometimes a lot of dessert, some meat, some potatoes. But of course, the main thing is it's something you really want to play. You really got to feel very strongly about those pieces. You believe in them. Yeah. And so I'm always looking out for music that I can play, you know, by myself. That I can craft into a good program. So in a way, it's almost like crafting together a composition where you have a little introduction, you know, you have an exposition, and then you know,
development.
Yes, development.
And recap at the end. It makes sense. Audiences, their approach to guitar music has, I would say, probably has changed a lot in the last years. We see more and more music students that are interested in actually becoming music majors in guitar.
Yes.
What would you attribute that to necessarily?
Well, I think the guitar is really finally coming into its own. It's for a long time, it was considered not a legit instrument, but of course, thanks to efforts from people like Segovia, John Williams, Julian Bream, now we have a very established instrument. And the great thing about the guitar is, it's so much a part of popular culture. So many people start with playing popular music, and then they get more and more into it, and at some point they get into, you know, the more serious they get, the more they discover. So that's how I think many of them come to the classical guitar. I know I had a student many years ago, and he was just a great guitar player, electric. And hearing him play, I just knew this guy is going to be a great classical player. And so, and of course they call him the guitar shredder, right? So I told him, I'm going to turn you into a classical shredder now. And actually, he's graduating. Wow. So I'm very proud of what he's accomplished. That is, yeah. So as far as what I recommend for them to do is, I really recommend for them to be very, very open-minded. You know, just open up your heart to the classical guitar. Now, of course, sometimes if you give them something that they maybe don't connect to, like you know, some of the classical pieces, some Baroque pieces. Strangely enough, a lot of them have a natural connection with Renaissance music. I don't know if you noticed that.
I know a lot of them like Baroque as well, but
yes. Yeah. Yes.
Mostly with Renaissance then, you see.
Yes, they tend to connect to Renaissance music. But when you give them something by Kakasi, you know, something a little bit drier, etude, then of course I always tell them that at the beginning you need to play, you know, these pieces so that you develop your technique. Now if the student is really reluctant to do it, I said, don't worry about it. There are other pieces I can give you. So I give them South American music. I try to find nice South American pieces that they can play. Antonio Lauro. I even try to find, there's a composer in Germany by the name of Hans-Joachim Kaps. I discovered his music quite a few years ago, and he's written some wonderful ensemble music. But I've been able to find some of his solo music.
Excellent, excellent. Jaime, you have some questions?
Yeah, so you're playing obviously classical stuff on your program, and then you're ending with flamenco. What is your approach? Because I'm beginning to study a little bit of flamenco. I don't consider myself a flamenco guitarist at all, but a lot of things are similar. There's arpeggios or scales, but you do them a little differently with flamenco, or the sound that they produce is a different sound that you maybe want to produce with classical. Do you take that into consideration at all, or what do you do when you...
Now that's a great topic. You know, people make too much of a big deal out of differences between flamenco and classical. For me, we're playing the guitar, nylon string guitar, look almost the same, identical. Why should there be a difference in technique? In fact, I'm actually, I have to say, I'm not a flamenco player. I pretend to play flamenco. Yeah, I studied with a very great player, Carl Herreshoff, and he was a great flamenco player. But for some reason, I never spent the time to really explore the art, to be able to really know how to play it correctly with all the right rhythms. I do love the music. Now, as far as the technique goes, I actually find a flamenco guitar technique much more relevant in this regard. You know, in this day, these days there's a lot of emphasis on sound and on tone, and everybody is so concerned about getting that very refined tone. But the question is, when you're talking tone, are you talking about the tone that you hear or the tone that the audience is hearing? Now, I've read people commenting on some of the great players like Julian Bring or some of the other players that, you know, in the audience, they sound really great, but if you come really close, the sound is a little bit different. The reason being, when you're in a concert hall and you're trying to project to the back of the hall, you can't be playing these beautiful tones. And the laws of acoustics also say that if, you know, beyond like the 10th or 20th row, nobody's going to hear those little details of, you know, finger clicking or whatever. They're not going to hear that. They're going to hear the sound, you know, enhanced by the ambience of the hall. So coming back to the technique between classical and flamenco, actually I have been very influenced by flamenco technique, and I've mentioned how I was influenced by Juan Serrano, and I've never differentiated between the two. And why? Because the one thing that attracts me about the classical flamenco players is their passion. Yeah. Many years ago, I was doing a clinic in another city with two other pretty well-known guitar teachers here in the state, and this is many years ago. I think it's in the 1990s, and we had just, in that festival, we had just had a flamenco player play the night before. And so somebody, a student in the audience, asked the question, why is it that classical players, why is it that flamenco players are so exciting? And implication is that classical players are not so exciting. And of course, one of the teachers said that, well, you're confusing apples and oranges, right? They're not the same. Well, I totally disagree with that, because we're talking about music. So it is true that there are basic differences in terms of repertoire, in terms of rhythms, stylistic differences. But when it comes to moving the people,
the approach.
Yes, capturing the heart, making it exciting for them, there should be no differences. Now, I have seen jazz pianists and who you might call the piano equivalent of flamenco, and classical pianists. There's no differentiation. The great jazz pianists like Keith Jarrett, you know, there's no difference. So why should we as classical guitar players differentiate ourselves with flamenco? You know, in fact, when I heard Alfred Brendel play in London, my gosh, his passion was just so powerful. And you know, and then I see Keith Jarrett play, and you see the same passion, no differentiation. We're talking about music, touching people's emotions, trying to connect to them. I do want to say one thing though, that of course there's certain things that flamenco players do that may not be so appropriate. But those who are talking about the details, yeah. But when we come to the core, the technique will be the same.
It's interesting because they're basically referring to the approach that we take, and, and you find the same thing with ensembles also. I mean, you maybe think of the Berlin Philharmonic, who, when you watch them play, it's almost like a live forest moving because there's so much passion happening on stage, as opposed to some other even professional ensembles that are, you know, just somehow it's a little stale almost. You know, so I completely understand what you're saying. It really comes down to how we engage ourselves with the music, and that somehow carries out into the audience as well.
You see, I always feel like classical players, we can hide behind our so-called intellectualism. Oh, you don't understand this. Oh, you know, back in the day, they do it this way. So we hide behind a lot of cover. But, you know, popular players, they have nowhere to hide. If they don't grab you, they're not called back. So they have to have a direct connection with the audience. They got to really connect, not to say we're going to play to the lowest common denominator, but we do have to understand that we do have a duty to make what we do relevant.
When you're preparing to go on stage, Philip, when you're getting ready, do you have a particular thing you think about? Is there a particular procedure you do before going on stage, or is it just maybe you don't have anything at all? And you know, because there are artists that have a certain thing they do before they go on stage, or think a certain way, or have to have complete silence, or maybe not. Do you have any particular method that you go through before you go on stage that you can share with us, possibly?
You're talking about a pre-recital routine, right?
Absolutely.
Well, we all try. We all try to have a routine to calm ourselves. To pretend we've done this many times before, so we don't have to worry about it.
So we're not the only ones that think this way.
So we try, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So what I try to do is of course, try to quiet the mind and put myself into a very communicative frame of mind. Sometimes, you know, it comes to a point these days sometimes when I'm not nervous, I'm even more worried because I want to be a little nervous. When I'm not nervous, sometimes I go out there, I'm not able to communicate as well. And, you know, it's almost like acting. For instance, you know, I've been amazed how, you know, good actors can just turn on this persona, like on cue. And a lot of times, you know, we have to play a concert, and some of it is very, very deep, heavy stuff, but we're not particularly feeling very deep or heavy. You know, we're not in a frame of mind. So part of that preparing is trying to get the mind to focus on giving, you know, getting into that frame of mind where you're really in a giving mode. Because you got to be communicative. Again, like the actor, you got to be able to convey what you're trying to play to the audience.
Excellent.
In a believable way.
Yeah, very good point.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, you mentioned to me earlier that you don't practice the day of. So going back to maybe the practice routine itself, can you talk a little bit about leading up to the concert, how much you practice, and then why is it, I guess, that the day of you don't practice?
Well, I'm always aware that if you practice too much on the day, that by the time the concert comes, you're tired. So you want to leave the best for last. So on the day itself, I try not to practice more than an hour, maybe just half an hour. Just loosen up the fingers. I like to go through all the pieces slowly, kind of review them, refresh on my memory. And then one thing is I never play the entire piece through. If I play most of it, I would always finish end before the end, because I want to save the best for the concert. So that's pretty much it, and try not to think too much about the performance.
So on performance day, you don't practice at all?
No, yeah. Sometimes it can backfire. You can go on stage and you realize you're not warmed up. So you do have to practice.
Yeah.
But I try not to over practice.
Yeah.
I know some people will work totally differently, right? But I'm not sure how it works for them.
It works for them, yeah.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to a young student, a high school student, for instance, who's thinking, I have a talent, I'm considering music as a profession. What advice would you give someone in that situation?
Well, this may not be what my school wants to hear, or my department chair wants to hear, but whenever
We won't play this in that area.
whenever I meet with a young student and they're considering becoming a musician, I always ask them, is there something else you want to do? Is there something else that you feel you can be happy doing with your life? If they say, oh yeah, there's something else, I say, do the other thing. Because it's hard being a musician. You have to be totally committed. You have to really know this is what you want to do. People sometimes think that studying to be a musician is so fun, but it is so much work, especially, and they will find out the theory, the sight singing, they have to learn how to play piano, and so much involved, as opposed to just a regular liberal arts, program, which is, academic. But so my advice will be, if you really feel this is for you, go for it, because you only got one life to live. I think there's a TV show.
It was a soap opera, right?
Yeah. All of us only got one life to live. Yeah. Now, of course, some people think, believe in reincarnation. But anyway, assuming you only got one life to live.
We're talking about this life.
Yes. You got to enjoy it. Yeah. You got to make it fulfilling. You got to do something that means something to you. And if music is what you want to do, go for it, because that's what I chose for myself. And I've never regretted. Well, maybe once or twice.
I think we all once or twice.
Yes, a few regrets, but most of it pretty, really happy with my decision, because, I was actually enrolled as a law major at university. This was back in New Zealand. First year at university, I was a law student. So it took quite a bit of thinking through things to decide to become a musician. And the one question that I asked myself was, one day you're going to be 50 years old, and you're going to look back, and you're going to ask yourself, am I regretting what I've done? Yeah. And that's a critical question. Of course, I passed that point a few years ago. And fortunately, I don't have any regret. Yeah. So those are the questions a person needs to ask themselves. To be true to yourself. If this is really what you want to do, you do it. Now, of course, after they make that decision, then they have to pick a good teacher. And of course, we got one right here. Yeah. So finding a good teacher is crucial, because you can find some teachers who are just out there to find fault. Mm-hmm. Now, I firmly believe if you want to find fault, you can find it in anybody, everybody. So you need to have a teacher who will see all your strengths, and then of course be able to see all your weaknesses, and then be able to help you work on your weaknesses, but at the same time nurture your strengths, because every one of us have strengths that we need to nurture. And so if you find a teacher who's only saying, well, everything you're doing is wrong, now I got to fix your problems. If you find a teacher like that,
run.
Yeah.
So you've written a lot of books, and I'm going to sound like Philip's biggest fan right now. And I have all of them, and they've helped me, not only become a better player, but I think even more importantly, a better teacher. What are you working on now? Are you working on any new books that you have?
Yes, actually, I have one new book. I have written, now these are some of them are pretty small books. The first one is The Art of Virtuosity, and that basically outlined the basic philosophy. And maybe more than philosophy, it's the basic principles that have to be in place. Then, of course, after that, I wrote The Art of Virtuosity for Guitar Players, which is really a compendium of all the things, every technical point that I could share is in that book. And then after that, I wrote 2 books basically on how to strategize as a musician. And of course, I called it How to Be Extraordinary.
I love that.
I like good titles. And then after that, I wrote Practicing the Tremolo.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, for me, that's something that, and the book is very, it's unusual in the sense that there are no exercises in there. It's all strategies. I laid out, I think, 5 different strategies on how to practice it. And then the last book I wrote is How to Become a Virtuoso in 60 Days.
I love that.
Of course, 60 days is, because I always say, if you don't like my book, if you don't think you learned anything, I'll give you a full refund. Now, of course, if you pay by PayPal, it's only 60 days. So that's why it's 60 days.
So far, no one's...
So far, no one's asked for a refund. Now, I actually have one more book that I started writing about 2 years ago, which I haven't finished yet. Practicing rest stroke scales. Okay. Yeah. And again, it's a list of different strategies, much more strategies than exercises. I find exercises overly rated, because if you practice those exercises, but you don't have the right strategy, you won't get to that point. You won't be able to master the technique. What do I mean by strategies? For me, every one of these techniques require a breakthrough. In the tremolo playing, for example, in scale playing, requires a breakthrough. And that breakthrough is a very sudden change. One moment you can't do it, the next moment you can. It's sudden understanding, a realization. And so all my strategies are for you to try to find that breakthrough, to enable it to happen. And sometimes it may take a few years. You got to be very determined. For example, in the tremolo, one of the strategies that I mentioned is to practice. Now, this is a little unusual. Is to practice with the guitar tuned down. Yeah, very flat, tuned very flat.
Oh, really?
And somehow this, having that floppiness in the strings, somehow gives you that ability to find that.
Precision.
Yeah. And so that's just one of the strategies.
Completely tuned down.
Yeah.
No,
The strings are loose.
yeah. And
When I hear that going on in your studio, I know you're practicing your tremolo.
yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So the strategy is mainly to find those breakthroughs.
Wow, excellent. And people can find these books on
My website, philiphii.com.
If you wouldn't mind sharing with us your thoughts on why the fine arts are important in the overall education of our young people today.
Well, the fine arts is really the soul of a society. Can you imagine a society without the arts? How sterile, how dead, how boring that will be. And it comes down to feeding our soul. Every society has to focus on the arts while it's building up the other things. So for me, for example, I know of certain people in some countries that I know that I've been to that they don't listen to music at all, and I'm wondering how dry, how what's the word? Boring the existence is. All they do is they go to work, they come home, they watch TV, and then they go to sleep. and they don't know anything about the arts. They haven't experienced Beethoven's symphonies, the wonder of Bach's music. And it's like you go through life and you're missing all this. What a waste, And I'm talking about music, but of course, all the other arts is the same,
I think it's well said.
Yeah.
Well said. We've been here with Philip Hii, our guest artist, classical guitarist, who will be performing tomorrow evening here at the Cooper Center at South Texas College. We've been joined by Jaime Garcia, our guitar instructor here at South Texas College as well. I'm William Buhidar, the Assistant Dean for Fine and Performing Arts. Again, Philip, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
We're always great to be with you.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Jaime.